Okay, who's the failed journalist in this situation? Hey everyone, this is Kevin, the Apptrepreneur, also known as the failed journalist in other circles, either by detractors or my other YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to after you subscribe and ring the bell to this one. And today I want to talk about the absolute craziest console reviews I have ever read. Now, full disclosure, I have an Xbox Series X and have so far been unable to get a PlayStation 5. I would be playing my Xbox Series X, except I can't. I just can't. Check out this video for more information. Nevertheless, a new console launch is an exciting time. I have been playing consoles since, I wouldn't say necessarily Atari, although my family did have an Atari, but since Nintendo. The original NES, that was what I was getting. And I remember when there was going to be a Super Nintendo and a Sega Genesis, new console releases were always a huge event in my house as my parents rolled their eyes and realized that basically I was going to be saving my dog walking money for a new machine just so I could buy all new games, while old games probably sat collecting dust. Such is the case of a gamer. And while I know that these consoles aren't the graphical upgrade that we're used to seeing in the past, and they probably never will be again, it's still exciting to get brand new hardware, seeing what it can do, and playing all new games. And thus, as a result, I read a ton of reviews on the systems, about the specs, things that people don't care about, things that I don't even completely care about, just to see what is the new system like, what could you do with it, and do I need to get rid of my old systems to make shelf space for these? It looks like I will. And yet Kotaku, the website that used to be owned by gamers and has since become corporate, they were bought by Gawker and then they were, transferred to someone else, has released a couple of articles that are rather strange in my opinion, and in fact may even be bat crap insane when you look at it. So let's start with the PlayStation 5 review, and it's just simply titled PlayStation 5, the Kotaku review. You've got a nice little system, picture of the PlayStation 5 system, but interestingly, when I looked this up, the original title for the review was PS5 Review, Great Console, Weird Timing. They have since changed that to simply the Kotaku Review, which actually seems pretty fitting considering how crazy this review actually was. Now, the beginning of the review is not too terrible. Ian Walker, who writes this review, says, "I'm sitting at my desk, staring at the PlayStation 5, looming over my media stand. Entertainment center is a little too grandiose for the small piece of Target furniture that holds all my gaming stuff, and wondering how the heck I'm going to review this thing. How would my boss, whose various PlayStation 4 reviews I've skimmed several times so as to glean some insight into what I should cover, review this thing? How can anyone at this very moment in time review this thing?" Now, here's the thing. This is not a terrible start to a review because, if I was reviewing consoles, I would probably wonder the same thing. There's not as much of a graphical power upgrade. The sound is probably better, but how do you make that sound interesting? And some people actually look at the Spider-Man Miles Morales game compared to the original game, and they're like, it doesn't look that different. So I understand the dilemma. However, it appears that how should I review this thing meant something completely different to him than what it would mean to you and me. Now, we're not going to actually read this full review because I think you should read it yourself. And here's the thing, for most of the part, the review is not bad. It talks about the price, it talks about the design, it talks about the interface. This is all very important. And it gets to this really, really bizarre part of the review where it says, but does it really matter? And keep in mind, the review has been almost overwhelmingly positive at this point. He likes the machine, likes the game, likes the frame rate, likes everything, but does it really matter? And here's where it gets problematic. This review has spent 3,000 words talking about the PlayStation 5, which is the most I've written about anything. It's as good a video game console as there has ever been. Sounds like a recommendation. The combination of ultra high definition video, increased frame rates, high-end graphics techniques like ray tracing, and the lightning fast SSD make it feel like a real deal next-gen successor to the PlayStation 4. Wonderful, what's the problem? And if you're not ready to give up on the previous console, the PS5 reliably runs a vast majority of the PlayStation 4 library, with many of those games receiving upgrades to fidelity, frame rate, and loading times. But I'd be remiss to ignore all the reasons not to be excited for the PlayStation 5. And this is where you would think that maybe he's going to talk about, maybe the price is too high. Maybe there's not as many launch games available. Maybe, the frame rate is improved, but not substantially. What are the reasons? And the reasons: the world is still reeling under the weight of the COVID-19 pandemic. There are more Americans out of work right now than at any point in the country's history, with no relief in sight. Our healthcare system is an inherently evil institution that forces people to ration life-saving medications like insulin. What? What's this about? As I'm writing this, it looks very likely that Joe Biden will be our next president. Yeah, nice. I don't care. What's this got to do with the PlayStation 5? But it's clear that the worst people aren't going away just because a new old white man is sitting behind the... Oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me. You turned this system review that's supposed to be about whether or not the PlayStation 5 is a good piece of hardware and turned it into a political stance. I got a little bit of flack from some viewers last week when I talked about a bunch of conservatives leaving Facebook for Parler, and the message of that video, which some people seem to not realize, was that basically we need to learn to talk to one another, we have to learn to love one another, and that going from one echo chamber to another is not necessarily helpful. I got criticism for inserting unneeded politics into my channel, but here's the thing. The video was intended to talk about politics. So in the context of that video, the politics were not out of place. That was the intent. And if you didn't like it, there were over 1,000 other videos I've uploaded you could watch. But the purpose of this article is whether or not you want a PlayStation 5. And there is no need to bring up Donald Trump or Joe Biden or our healthcare system. And it's one of those things where it's like, he does this and he's like, well, are you saying politics are important? And it's like, no, I'm not saying politics aren't important. I just don't want to talk about politics now. You know what it's kind of like? It's kind of like you're at your dad's 70th birthday party and everyone's sharing wonderful memories and good times, maybe some future plans we'd like to do. What are you going to do in the next 70 years of your life? And somebody raises their glass and says, doesn't the election suck? Doesn't our healthcare system need reform? Maybe we should defund the police. There are real problems out there. We're celebrating someone's birthday. And you're like, dude, really? Not the right time. The harsh truth is that for the reasons listed above and more, a lot of people simply won't be able to buy a PlayStation 5 regardless of supply. Or if they can, concerns over increasing austerity in the United States and the growing threat of widespread political violence supersede any enthusiasm about the console's SSD or how ray tracing makes reflections more realistic. That's not to say you can't be excited about those things. I certainly am on some level, but there's an irrefutable level of privilege attached to... Oh, you've got privilege if you want to be excited about something. With all due respect, Ian, the world sucks. And it sucked for 2,000 years or more. It sucked for a very long time. And so, yeah, people might want to be excited about getting a brand new gaming system, a brand new Spider-Man game, or a brand new Call of Duty, whatever you want to have. And maybe they're just excited about having a new toy to play around with to take their minds off the troubles of the world. And you call that privilege? Well, yeah, of course it's a privilege to not be worrying about the world so much, but that's fine. People need to not be concerned about the horrors of the world to be happy. And there is nothing wrong with wanting to take your mind off the world. There is nothing about this that makes you a bad person. If, hey, you know what? This week you're concerned about getting a PlayStation 5 and you're not so concerned about the orange man or the sleepy man who's going to be president. Funny enough, he seems to agree with me. I won't deny that video games can be an escape. It feels great to lose yourself in a fictional world where you can fix everything. Some of us see a strength or personality trait in video game characters that we wish we saw in ourselves. As much as it sucks for real-world problems to intrude on that space, I found it increasingly difficult to focus on video games amid our current situation. Well, I'm sorry that you can't have a little bit of escapism, but a lot of people don't have that problem, and they're going to be reading this and going like, dude, chill out. You're messing up the vibe. Many nights, it's all I can do to play a couple runs of Spelunky before collapsing into bed for a few hours of doom scrolling and restless sleep. Well, Ian, maybe you shouldn't do that. Maybe you shouldn't doom scroll since you seem to be aware that you're doing that. Maybe you should not doom scroll and maybe you'll feel a little bit better. And I know I'm not alone in that feeling. We are collectively tired, and for good reason. Well, one of the reasons we're probably tired is because stuff like this keeps popping up in our video game reviews. Sony and Microsoft chose a hell of a time to release their next generation video game consoles. Oh yeah, like they were sitting there thinking, yeah, let's release our consoles in the middle of a pandemic and a very contentious election. I mean, yeah, of course they probably knew about the election, but yeah, they truly knew how much 2020 was going to suck, and now they decided to be insensitive and release the thing. Or maybe they even, if they did know all this stuff was coming, maybe that would have been a good thing. Like, hey, you know what, 2020 is really sucking. Let's release a new video games console and bring people a little bit of happiness. I think the PlayStation 5 is a great machine. But it's tough to recommend when folks are literally fighting for their lives while residing in the richest country in the world. I was very lucky to receive a PlayStation 5 for the purpose of this review, despite the fact that I am comfortable enough to have bought one on my own, and now he's complaining about getting a free system. Yeah, bite me, Ian. If you're in the same boat, I encourage you to grab the console and see what it's all about for yourself. If you aren't, don't feel like the PlayStation 5 would change your life. It's a video game system, and it's not going anywhere. I'm looking forward to a time when we can all chat about next generation gaming on equal footing without a dozen daily crises looming over our head. Until then, let's focus on what's truly important, even if that means dipping out of the next gen hype machine for a bit. This is several paragraphs of stuff that has nothing to do with the PlayStation 2. This is what happens when video game journalists want to be political commentators. They aren't on a website where they can shout their political beliefs, and they're free to have them. I want to stress out, they are free to have these opinions, but not the time, not the place, nothing to do with the product that people want to know about. This is ridiculous. Frankly, if I was the editor of Kotaku, I would have sent this review back, I would have crossed out that whole thing, and I would have said, write a new final couple paragraphs that is not whiny political crap or get out of my office right now. I mean, there is no reason for a review like this to slip through the cracks, but then Kotaku seems to have a history of that. Because it was not long after, or maybe it was a few days before, I don't know, where Kotaku Australia had a review for their Xbox Series X. And while this was not advertised as a pure review, technically speaking, it did have one of the strangest takes I've ever read, and it shows that either Kotaku is very, very easily triggered, or they don't have a whole lot to talk about in the first place. And that article is from a lady who says the Xbox Series X has too many horrifying holes. No joke, folks. This is an actual article from Kotaku Australia. So, it opens, as reviews for the Xbox Series X arrive, I'm here to talk about one aspect of the console that could impact your desire to buy one, as it has mine. I am a trypophobe, and I cannot own an Xbox Series X because of all its damn holes. For those of you who were as confused about this as I was, apparently trypophobia is defined. Phobia is an aversion to the sight of irregular patterns or clusters of small holes or bumps. It is not officially recognized as a mental disorder, although I think we can all agree, if you're afraid of holes, little itty-bitty holes, it probably is a mental disorder, but may be diagnosed as a specific phobia if excessive fear and distress occur. People may express only disgust to tryphobic imagery. This is someone that they decided to review the Xbox Series X. This person, someone who looks at the machine and says, there's too many horrifying fools, you decide that you want to write an article about this. Like, here's the thing. If you're afraid of too many holes, Xbox Series X's are on displays. If someone has this, whatever it is, it's not a mental illness, I guess it's a phobia. If someone has this phobia and they see an Xbox Series X, sees the holes, all they're going to do is they're going to say, too many holes, or they're going to put the system in a place where they can't actually look at the damn thing. This is trash article writing. Here's the thing. I know it's hard to write articles, and I know that Kotaku technically isn't journalism, but they were the home to Jason Schreier, who was a darn good journalist, and they have editors who should be telling people, like, hey, you know what? Politics do not have any place in our video game console reviews. There is no reason to go on for 3,000 words talking about a system specs, how it plays, the games, and then get into all of this heavy political stuff that has nothing to do with whether or not people want to get a PlayStation 5. If they are trying to convince their readers, like, hey, you know what, the world sucks, and maybe you shouldn't get a PlayStation 5 because that would make you privileged. You know what? I'm sorry. There's going to be privileged people out there. What's next? Should people not eat or get married or go to family gatherings because somewhere out there someone has it worse? Of course not. We only have one life to live. You might as well make it as best of a life as you can. Don't not have concern for people, but, you know, don't stop living in fear just because someone else might have it worse. This is not how you live your life. This is not how you make a point. And Kotaku should have fired this person. As for the person who's afraid of the holes, it's not as offensive because, you know what, it wasn't a system review, but the thing is, this wasn't going to look good. I mean, I'm not saying that this phobia, this trypophobia, isn't a real thing. I guess people can have a phobia over anything, but they should have known that that was going to look really ridiculous if they dedicated a whole article to it. But hey, welcome to the state of video game journalism in 2020. You will never see me write an article like this. But I would like to know, what do you think about these articles? Are you offended by them, or do you think they have a point? I'd like to know. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.